Yeah, absolutely. I think we are seeing the difference. So we're seeing one thing we're seeing with the cost of living is quite polarized behaviors. During COVID, we saw that while there was some polarization in some categories like alcohol, where people were either drinking more because of boredom or making the fun at home, creating that bar-like environment at home and using it as a way to socialize at home. On the flip side, we saw people cutting down on alcohol as well because of health reasons and saving money as well. But generally we saw quite a consumers behaving in similar ways when it came to stockpiling, when it came to purchasing habits, when it came to health and hygiene and germ prevention. So we obviously saw a big spike in cleansing and personal hygiene products. So we saw like a general behavior or general, just regardless of the types of people, we saw a general shift in one way. Whereas cost of living crisis is creating quite a bit of a polarization right now, not just among people who are lower income or higher income, but also the way people are approaching it in terms of their optimism towards their own futures, and also in terms of having had 2 years of lockdown and restrictions. They're not quite ready to cut back yet. So we're seeing quite divergent behaviors, and it's quite
Hmm.
interesting right now whether that will
Yeah,
continue or not.
I feel like we're only sort of coming out of COVID. You know, it's something that we're still trying to understand what the world's going to look like.
Mhm.
Um, but I feel like the big difference for me between what's happening now and with COVID is that in COVID there were kind of two things. It was really sudden, right? It happened just overnight. We all probably had flights we were supposed to get on, and then our company shut us down. Then came in, government interventions where we couldn't move. If we look at the stat that we have on the screen right now, this is kind of trickling in, right? It's 70% are noticing it, and 1 in 3 of these feel like it's significant. So it's not something that just happened overnight like COVID did, and the world just changed. This is something that's creeping in, and we're starting to see the impact coming in a different way, which I think is, and Vidisha, you hit it. It's that 1/3 of the people that see it, they're getting hit hard, right? If you rely a lot on your gas, this can, and you have kind of a smaller income, this is going to be big for you. If
Of
if that's not the situation that you're in, it's easier to not notice this. Whereas with COVID, we all know, it happened, and we were in our houses and couldn't breathe.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple differences. I mean, definitely what Walt had talked about, but I think also with COVID, it was kind of the first real big pandemic that people were kind of digesting. So I think the frame of mind there versus the inflation was a little bit different. Like Walt said, it was a little bit sudden, like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? Now this inflation, it's kind of something else that's big and coming on. And I think people are a little bit, I don't say prepared for it, but are understanding it like, okay, having some coping, mechanisms to get through it. I know especially some of our younger consumers are like, everyone thinks everything's a pandemic, and it's like that's just what they've grown up with, like yeah, just something else that we have to think about. So I think that mindset is a little bit different. I also think, I mean, just particularly with our category, the easiest thing is with COVID. I mean, you were literally shutting down stores, so people couldn't get to the stores. So that was just a whole issue of, or like Vidisha said, stockpiling, which doesn't really bode well for an impulse category. Whereas now the stores are open, but now there's a different challenge of just making sure that we're actually getting in their basket, because now if they're more conscious of what they put in their basket, they're thinking a little bit more about the choices that they're making. So I think that's probably a big difference that we see within COVID versus the inflation.
The consumers around the world are going to face the same cost of living pressures. But right now, that's not what's top of mind in every market. So yeah, inflation and cost of living is sort of top of mind in the UK and US, and as such, consumers in those markets are also feeling more insecure about their finances. But right now, in markets like Brazil and India, they have bigger concerns around the healthcare system, and for everyone to get the right healthcare. And in China, again, it's with the recent sort of spike again in the COVID cases and the situation there. The COVID is back being top of mind in that market. So It is coming in all the markets, but right now it's only top of mind in the UK and US.
A heavy topic, but with this cost of living means inequality is only going to get worse, and that will really increase the probability of civil unrest. So there's this just uncertainty and a little bit of like safety concerns and what's going on that people are just kind of carrying with them every day. And then I think aside from just kind of at that macro level in economics, with this high uncertainty, I think increases like a sense of control. So on the everyday level, people really want this control within their lives. So one of those is like making sure they're keeping those routines, whether it be an evening walk, whether it be, a 2 p.m. snack, whether it be, going to the gym. So I think because of all the certainty in the broader sense, they start to have a little bit more self-control in these areas of routine in their life.
Economy confidence index has taken a dip since the start of the year, and consumers are worried, and there is growing concern about a global recession in all markets. In fact, even in Brazil and India, where we mentioned that there are other things that are top of mind, the fact that there may be a recession is starting to hit them too, and we're seeing this sort of slight pessimism about the economy. But interestingly, it's not all sort of doom and gloom. While consumers are feeling sort of down towards the economy and more outwardly, in terms of their own futures, 1 in 2 actually told us they're feeling quite optimistic about their own futures. It varies slightly by market, with in India it being highest, and of course in China and UK it being a bit lower. The coping mechanisms that consumers are adopting. And here you see, again, very different sort of coping mechanisms, and they vary across consumer groups. And this is, again, not just related to income, but, we're seeing the flip side of behaviors. So some of these quotes are just an indication of that. In India, we're seeing one person saying that they've limited themselves from going into restaurants to save money, whereas another person is saying they're actually going to the restaurants more because they're saving on gas, water, and electricity at home. So it's interesting to see this sort of flip view of how consumers are responding. And similarly, in opposing strategies to transit costs. Some people are using public transport more to save on fuel, whereas if public transport is seen to be getting too expensive, they're spending less on that and may spend more or find alternative methods of traveling, bikes, walking, but even may end up spending on the fuel instead. And when we look at sort of some of their spending strategies as well, or spending mechanisms, again, we already start seeing that people have some of the strategies that people are adopting include, actively looking for promotions, already starting to switch brands. So either they're trading down to value brands or private label, or actually trading up to luxury brands based on quality. So again, diverging behaviors. Some are actually decreasing usage or cutting out altogether, cutting categories, cutting services out altogether. And some on the flip side are bulk buying. Again, not more to control costs and spend now to save later because they're worried about the cost of that product going up.
Yeah, no, I think it's, for me, the kind of word of the day with this is trade-offs. And so I think that what we're seeing is that, consumers will be making trade-offs by choice, of course. And at this moment, it's about trying to kind of keep a pulse on what's happening, understand the trade-offs that are being made. And then a big part for us is then working through with the operators so that they understand what's going on with the consumer, because we can pass that knowledge through to them. And by doing that, they can then start to fill in gaps that start to pop up. One place where I've seen we've started to see those trade-offs taking place is that people are bringing in, the Tupperware to work. So maybe, whereas before they might have gone to the local restaurant or the workplace canteen, now they're also starting to just bring things in. And so one thing that becomes really, really interesting about that is the way that a consumer's mood changes through the day. and the products that they're open to is very, very different. So that person in the morning, when of course they're preparing their Tupperware, they could be optimistic, feeling, thinking about health, saying I'm going to have a good day, and then that they pack that Tupperware. It's all really good products. It's very, very, very healthy. And then what ends up happening is that by the afternoon they might be stressed. They might be feeling a little bit different. And we know that when consumers are in that moment of stress, they want to reach for something that's kind of like a comfort, more of an indulgence. And so how can we now start to meet those consumers in that space that's opened up? And I think that becomes the topic is, okay, we understand they're changing, we understand the trade-offs, but where are the gaps that are going to start to open up, and how can the operators then start to fill those for them? One place where I've seen we've started to see those trade-offs taking place is that people are bringing in, the Tupperware to work. So maybe whereas before they might have gone to the local restaurant or the workplace canteen, now they're also starting to just bring things to them. And so one thing that becomes really, really interesting about that is the way that a consumer's mood changes through the day, and the products that they're open to is very, very different. So that person in the morning, when of course they're preparing their Tupperware, they could be optimistic, feeling, thinking about health, saying I'm going to have a good day, and then that they pack that Tupperware. It's all really good products. It's very, very, very healthy. And then what ends up happening is that by the afternoon they might be stressed. They might be feeling a little bit different. And we know that when consumers are in that moment of stress, they want to reach for something that's kind of like a comfort, more of an indulgence. And so how can we now start to meet those consumers in that space that's opened up? And I think that becomes the topic is, okay, we understand they're changing, we understand the trade-offs, but where are the gaps that are going to start to open up, and how can the operators then start to fill those?
Yeah, I mean, promotions is not new in our world anyways. We've always that's always been the case, especially within confectionery. What's on promotion, it tends to get a lot of visibility anyway. So, I mean, I think how we talk about at the most basic level, I mean, we do really, for a little Mars Wrigley plug of products, we do have great products, and we ensure that they're differentiated and why, would consumers pick us up versus someone else and have great ingredients. So that's always top of mind, and we maintain that in all of our products that we do. I think there's also this idea of the intangibility of a brand. So, how we're showing up, not just at the product level, but how we can make sure we're showing up in consumers' lives at the right time. So really understanding what the consumer is doing and knowing that, like, hey, using this product, at this time, meeting them with this kind of content and messaging is really important for us, so that it does, they're not just looking for the promotion, but they feel like the brand understands them. Yeah. We do partnership. Just recently, we did an M&M's partnership with Adidas, which was, like on shoes. So it's like, again, it's not necessarily about when you're at shelf, but outside of shelf, and bringing that a little bit more top of mind to show the intangibility of a brand that you can't get anywhere else. So, promotions are always going to be there, and not gonna lie, people still look for the red, but there's definitely some ways to combat it, which I think we've seen work with a lot of our great brands.
So we talked about that revenge spending. So on the one hand, we are seeing sort of those optimistic consumers turning to that revenge spending to make up for lost time. So there's some factors that contribute to that as well. So we have seen this is from various external sources, that we are seeing wage growth in the UK and the US. With COVID, what that triggered was work-life rebalancing. And that's also included in the government-backed trials of the 4-day working week that have been going on as well. And also the increasing ease of paying on credit. So we know about in the UK, we have that Klarna, and we're also seeing the likes of Apple entering the sector. And we even see from our bees that they've been so fed up, they've changed their habits and lifestyles, which mean that they are actually not cutting back discretionary spend right now. They are spending money on luxury items, on going out, on eating out, on drinking out. So that's one side of the coin. On the other side of the coin, we see when we look at various services and activities, we are seeing the more cautious consumers, they are cutting back on out of home activities. So the top over here where we're actually, so this is our, I should explain the chart, this is our spend index where we've asked consumers, where are you sort of prioritizing spend versus cutting spend, and what we're seeing is the likes of groceries, personal care products, even food delivery right now is still on the positive, let's say. The likes of sort of energy, etc., some of those are essentials, but also water, energy, but also in terms of travel, I think that because of the limited activity or limited travel over the last 2 years, people are not quite cutting holidays just yet, or even TV subscriptions just yet. But where we are starting to see some spend being cut or deprioritized, I should say, is on entertainment in events out of the home, in eating out, but also then on the likes of some public transport and going to the gym, because we also saw in the pandemic with gyms being closed, people actually set up home gyms, home studios, and found other ways to work out.
If people aren't indulging in more of the bigger experiences, how do we then just show up where they are? So, if they're not having movie night, they're going to a movie. Mm-hmm. How do we make sure that we're there? If someone is throwing a big party, a COVID, hey, we're done, or just, a birthday party or whatever, how do we make sure we show up at that birthday party? So I think either way, we're trying to play both sides of the coin to hit both of those issues.
Yeah, I think when we look at the away from home environment or the out of home environment or food service environment right now, the cost of living, this crisis isn't probably the biggest impactor quite yet. Like the COVID is still looming large, and really until the kind of dust settles on what's going to happen inside of the workplace, if companies do want their workers to go back in, and that ends up being kind of the push, then a lot of the restaurants will just naturally start to move up, because the main place where restaurants have been is based on capturing those workers. Those were the biggest occasions in the past. So I think until that dust settles, it's going to be a little bit difficult for us to really understand how this is going to impact it. The other thing is, of course, the overlaps. Are we looking at versus 2019? Or are we looking at versus last year or the year before? So. Yeah. So I think we kind of just have to let the dust settle on that one a tiny bit. We have to be cognizant that this is happening, and we just have to be kind of flexible and agile in how we start to approach the channel.
And this is a quite common question around, if I have less money to spend on disposable, discretionary products, and given that the green products tend to be still more expensive, is this cost of living crisis coming at the cost of more sustainable, more climate-friendly products in the end? I don't know, Janet, if you want to start, are there any, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think we're still looking into it. Sustainability was a huge thing for us. And, when you're going into COVID, and then people were stocking up on paper towel and toilet paper and single serve packaging, and the idea of, sustainability and less packaging went down the drain. And I think there is this inherent, I hate to say, a little bit me first. That does not mean that people don't care about the environment, but I think they are trying to see what can I do for myself and the planet, but I think the planet is kind of secondary. So I think we're hoping, and I think we as bigger companies can kind of take more of a lead in that. But I do think at the end of the day, consumers, we've done some testing within our products, and they're not really willing to pay more for it. However, they expect us to step up and provide it for them as well. So there's, I think they want it, but they also realize that we need to kind of do our role. We, meaning bigger companies or companies in general, have to be more mindful of it.
The lipstick effect, was considered to be a sort of leading economic indicator. It's all about that, what Janet mentioned as well, that affordable luxury, and making people feel good in times when they're not feeling, times when they're feeling down. So it's on the flip side, you have the piano, which it's not just because it's obviously a highly expensive item, but it's actually it's related to home sales. And people actually moving home, which we know during a recession actually reduces. People don't want to take the risk. So that's why piano sales actually take a nosedive, or they did in the last recession.
It's a very interesting question. So one of the things what we are obviously seeing from the data is that we very slightly touched on at the beginning is multi-benefit categories. Why? Because it's a very smart way of saving money, right? Normally, I might have a different moisturizer and a sunscreen and a serum, and all of a sudden, that moisturizer, which is also a sunscreen, starts looking very good because I can actually like drop my spend to a third. So that's also a very smart way of avoiding very deep discounts for the consumers as well, like, and taking a massive hit on your bottom line, actually being able to keep the price point and keep the market share by introducing multiple benefits. But yeah, we would love to hear, Janet, Walt, from your perspective. Walt, if you wanted to start, what are some of the areas and categories you guys observe where it's resilient?
Yeah, no, I think the lipstick, what you said about, multi-purpose makes a lot of sense. And I also think that, Vidisha, you touched on something earlier where you just intuitively said, people haven't cut down on travel yet. And so I think that what we're going to start to see is, for the people that are affected most during this crisis, the home's going to be a stronger magnet. So whatever can kind of happen inside of the walls of your house or within closer distances, those are the categories that'll be a little bit more successful. So, what kind of distracts you? What has like a high fun value? What's kind of low in cost? I would assume that something like gaming, which popped up really big in the pandemic, would go up. So like, handheld games. You might have streaming services. You mentioned Vidisha. That's one that hasn't really dropped off yet. It's very, very low cost, and you have tons and tons of entertainment. To your point, Tuksha, it's family entertainment. It's entertainment for yourself. It's kind of family time. So it serves multiple benefits. And then I think things like do it yourself. So again, this is a multiple benefit. You kind of distract yourself while you're building whatever it is you want to build around the house. And then you have something when you're finished that you can use. So kind of staying in, doing projects like that. And then I feel like something like local travel, even staycations will probably pop up, and maybe you're not going to take that huge trip to that you've been planning. You'll just pause that one. So the categories associated with kind of being around your house, I think will be the big ones.
This is what the picture is right now in terms of where people are prioritizing spend versus cutting spend. So it's not surprising that the essentials of groceries, fresh produce, personal hygiene and cleaning products are obviously being prioritized right now. The ones we're starting to see a bit of a dip in, though, we've put sort of it's beauty and alcohol. But interestingly, when you dive into beauty, lipstick is not on the downward trend. Lipstick is actually up. So that lipstick effect is actually being seen in our data. It's not on a chart, but we are seeing that in our data. So we are seeing a dip on beauty overall as a category, and alcohol too.
So, when we start to look at something like like who are your shoppers, right? So what category you're in, what type of premium are we talking about? And and then if we start to think, okay, if we're in a category where gas going up 50%, and for your car isn't going to affect your overall bank account, then you're probably pretty safe. That's not your consumer when we're starting to talk about that. Now, if this recession really starts to eat into the people in your category, then that becomes a little bit different. And you just have to, it's about, staying true to yourself, continuing to make sure that value proposition is being communicated very well, and that value proposition is relevant to the new environment.
emphasizing other benefits, people are not going to pay that premium because it's green or climate friendly, but actually, communicating health benefits and additional benefits that you get from that product can still convince the right segment of the consumer to go and buy that product. It really then comes down to very targeted marketing, because at that point you are not going mass market. You're going to have to do some precision audience targeting to be able to get the message to the right people.
We are seeing consumers noticing an increase in beauty, in the prices of beauty products. And we are seeing slightly differing behaviors in higher income consumers versus lower income consumers. Higher income are sort of overall decreasing their, some higher income consumers are overall decreasing their budgets for beauty. They're reducing salon visits and replacing professional treatments with at-home alternatives. So a behavior we actually saw has continued from COVID to now. Whereas from lower income, you'll see that there's a cut in, they're using less and conserving. So, but on the flip side, also stockpiling. So there are quite different behaviors being adopted, where there's a view about sort of that in-home, experience and that DIY versus the sort of cut or conservation, let's say, of the products. Have people started switching brands, and why? And we see that actually in the higher income, people are moving, when they are allocating spend to beauty budget, they are going for more higher new brands, more luxury brands, because of the quality. And they think it actually lasts longer. And also there's the feel-good factor associated with it, that treat. Whereas on the lower income side, we're actually seeing them trade down to cheaper cheaper brands, so either value brands or private label. So it's quite interesting to see that sort of, again, polarization already on the brand side. I guess like my final question, at least, to Janet and Walt, maybe Walt, to you first, is like, are you expecting to see a similar trend in food and beverage? Are people going to be trading up and then trading down, with the mid range likely to be hit the most?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think that the flow of the way you presented this today makes a lot of sense, by starting with kind of category and then eventually getting to brand. I personally say that probably the category is the place where the trade-offs will start to take place first. But then let's say you do choose into a certain category, what do we look at inside of the brands? And I think we just have to remember that, what I consider mid-tier or high end is going to be very, very different from somebody else. And so it's hard to say in a lot of these categories what exactly is, what is premium. So a premium car for me is very different from someone who drives, a Lamborghini. That's just out of reach. And so it goes back to kind of what I said on the last question, is making sure that you stay true to yourself, making sure that value proposition comes through very, very strong and is relevant. We have to make sure that your proposition is one that the consumers need in the new environment. And if we look back at COVID, Lay's it's not positioned as like a super premium brand. It's probably premium to mid-tier. And then what happened though is it actually ended up being, based on the research you all sent out, the number 2 brand globally, Lay's Walkers. And so people were opting into this kind of tier because it's a well-known brand, it's strong, people know it. They could get to what Janet likes to say about the affordable luxury.
So our cost of living monitor is actually a way to track how the consumer outlook is changing, but also discover the impact on your category, your brands, with the, understand the coping mechanisms in consumers' own words, and, really understand those differences by segmentations or segments, different consumer segments, whether it's low or high income, whether it's how their outlook on the world, whether it's families versus those who are like living alone. So it's important. Tuche mentioned at the start that and we've seen in our data already, there is different ways people are, there are opposing strategies, different ways people are approaching, and so it's always important that we look at everything by those different segments and by those different views.